Folks, you love college football. You enjoy what we do here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, as we bring on the best analysts across the nation, covering all the teams in the Power Five and best discussion, debate, and analysis around. So please like the video, share them on social media, leave your comments below. Let us know what you think about the Buckeyes, of course, for 2020, and subscribe here. And you hit the bell for the notifications, you know, when we're going live. Wide receiver, Pat. Great position for the Buckeyes in recent years, as it has been for maybe 4 decades to some degree, but just in terms of waves of players, that's certainly been during the second portion of Urban Meyer's stay, and now Ryan Day. Chris Olave, a bit of an afterthought coming out of high school because of injuries. He's emerged as a great talent. Garrett Wilson could be an emerging superstar. Run down the wide receivers for us and let us know what I think might be the big concern is not talent, obviously, but it's KJ Hill and the nuance that he provided as a slot guy that just knew what to do, was so dependable, and replacing that guy isn't always easy.
Certainly not. I mean, KJ Hill set the record for receptions at Ohio State last year, for a career. So it's definitely tough replacing a guy like that. But you mentioned Garrett Wilson. The plan, at least going into the spring, was move Garrett Wilson to the slot. He played on the outside as a true freshman last year. Move him to the slot and let him use, his physical attributes, his speed, his ability to track a ball, and kind of do some of the similar things that KJ Hill can do. They're different players. It's certainly going to be different, but they've got a nice matchup issue if Garrett Wilson does stick in that slot position. Chris Olave, as you mentioned, will be at his X receiver position on the outside. And then it's, filling in with other guys. And Ohio State has a ton of talent that can step in at receiver. They've recruited that position very well under Brian Hartline. And he's developed these players about as well as anyone in the country. So, Jaylen Harris is a senior, 6'5", big guy. Hasn't had a ton of opportunity at Ohio State just because of other guys, but he was, one of the first receivers, with the first team, I should say, at the beginning of spring practice. Now that you can ask, was that just, giving a senior his due to start off spring practice, or, had he done enough to earn, a look there? And I think he probably has. I've heard he had a really good winter. Maturity has really developed for him. So he's a guy, you can't teach that kind of size at 6'5". They use Benjamin Victor a lot in red zone situations. And I think Jaylen Harris could be that type of guy. But, we can list a number of guys beyond him. Jamison Williams, a sophomore out of St. Louis. Cameron Babb, a redshirt sophomore out of St. Louis. Babb's had back-to-back years where he's had serious knee injuries. Both of those guys, ironically, being from the same city, were the 13th best receiver in their respective recruiting classes. They'll both look to try and get on the field this year, especially Babb if he can stay healthy. A lot of talent in those two. They can fit into different roles as well. And then the freshman class is about as good as I've seen a recruiting class at one position in a long time. 4 players in Julian Fleming, Jackson Smith and Jigba, G. Scott Jr., and Mookie Cooper, who were ranked in the top 16 in the 247 sports composite at wide receiver. So, in a normal class, normal Ohio State receiver class, Mookie Cooper might be considered a future star. Well, he's kind of an afterthought as the 4th guy in that class, but all enrolled early. So all were on campus for winter workouts and the start of spring practice. I think you're going to see multiple of those guys play this year. Like I said, about as talented of a group as I've seen. I know the Ohio State coaching staff was very happy with what they saw from those 4 freshmen, just in the limited amount of time they were on campus before everything kind of shut down.
So you named close to 10 wide receivers, and all of them are either already productive in college or 4 or 5-star guys coming out of high school.
Yeah, it's crazy. You think about Ohio State historically, and they've certainly produced wide receivers, throughout the program's history. But to have this much talent at once, I'm not sure I can remember a time that's been the case. And then you add in a Justin Fields, a Heisman Trophy contender at quarterback, the offensive line that we talked about. This could be a passing attack. I've compared it a little bit to what we saw with Dwayne Haskins a couple of years ago. But I don't think it'll look that way. But in terms of the numbers that it could put up, I mean, this could be potentially record setting from an Ohio State standpoint with all those weapons, even guys out of the backfield that can catch the ball. There's just, about as talented of an offense that Ohio State's had. And then you add in, a guy like Ryan Day calling things. And we saw how he was able to do that last year and the previous 2 years as Ohio State's offensive coordinator. So on paper right now, this seems like an offense that could do some very big things. Obviously, it all has to come together and, work as well as it has in the past, but it certainly looks very positive offensively for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, pick your year in the past of Ohio State football. Take one of your favorite Ohio State football teams, and maybe you'll see a Santonio Holmes and Ted Ginn, or a Ginn or a Chris Gamble playing with a Michael Jenkins. You'll see two really good players who then played in the NFL. Maybe the third guy eventually turned into a good player, but not the waves and waves of players. So
right.
Two things that stand out to me, Pat, would be number two, just the offensive style of football is much different now. You do need 4 and 5 guys on the field much of the time, as opposed to, boom, you get 2 starting wide receivers, you bring in the third guy on 3rd and long. And then also, I think that is exemplified in the recruiting rankings, because I've been noticing that if you look at the wide receiver list, you'll see a guy's like 25th or 30th rated at wide receiver and think, he's not that good. Oh no, he's a top 130 player, like the glut of wide receivers, because of the increased passing at the high school ranks, and they're really sophisticated now, even at that level, throwing the football with 4 and 5 wides and develop these quarterbacks, that the wide receiver play has just developed at such a high level before they even get to college at this point.
Absolutely. I think that you hit the nail right on the head with what wide receivers, and they just understand, and quarterbacks too, understanding these spread offenses better because they're so used to them in high school. And even Julian Fleming comes from Pennsylvania. They weren't in a spread offense. They didn't throw the ball a ton, but you can just see the physical abilities of him. So now you get him working with a guy like Brian Hartline, who can develop wide receivers like we talked about. Now you've got that physical potential, that speed. Okay, now we work on routes, we work on timing, we work on all that. So it's certainly there. And the scheme wise, last year, I don't know how many people realize it, but Ohio State was in 12 personnel quite a bit because of the ability to run the ball. So 1 wide receiver, 2 tight ends, to get J.K. Dobbins going. From my understanding this year, that there will be a lot more 3, 4, 5 wide receiver sets. And that doesn't mean they won't run the ball, but they certainly will. And they'll use those tight ends because they're all very good blockers. But when you have the number of wide receivers you've got to find ways to get them on the field. That's probably your best bet for success, unless one running back really emerges like JK did a year ago. And, so I think they're going to throw the ball around a lot. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch.